Hello, I'm Jasper Smith, Senior Executive Editor for Commentary here at Tax Notes. I'm with Nicholas Lott, the winner of the 2024 Tax Notes Student Writing Competition. Nick's paper, titled New York, Amazon, and Company-Specific Tax Incentives, a Microcosm of a National Problem, centers on the polarizing company-specific tax incentive that New York offered Amazon to entice it to construct its second headquarters in Long Island City. Through the lens of equity, efficiency, and simplicity, this article analyzes New York and Amazon's agreement, then extrapolates the analysis to a broader analysis of all company-specific tax incentives. Nick is a JD Mack candidate at Brigham Young University and an associate editor at the BYU Law Review. He currently works in-house at Snap One, a NASDAQ-listed technology firm, and upon graduation will join the legal team at Vincent & Elkins in Houston, Texas. He has graciously agreed to join us to answer some questions about his experience with the competition. So welcome, Nick.
Thank you, Jasper. I'm really excited to be able to join you today. I'm very grateful and excited that my paper was chosen for this competition and definitely looking forward to speaking to you more about it.
Likewise, same on this end. Thank you for joining us again. So to get us started in the interview, can you give us a brief overview of your paper?
Definitely. So, the title of my paper, like you mentioned, is New York, Amazon, and Company Specific Tax Incentives. And so, to kind of provide some factual background on that, in 2017, Amazon, who, as you know, is a very large corporation, one of the largest in the entire world, announced that it was going to construct a second headquarters called Amazon HQ2. And throughout this process, Amazon invited the 50 states to submit bids with tax perks to compete to allow or for to entice Amazon to construct their headquarters in a state. And 238 different states and cities submitted proposals for this for the headquarters. And it became a politicized issue, political. And a year later, Amazon announced that it was going to construct HQ2 in New York and in Virginia. So it was actually going to split among the two states. But over the next few months, when the public found out the details of the deal, people became upset. Politicians began to push back. Civilians began to protest. And Amazon actually eventually announced that it was going to withdraw from New York and just construct both parts in Virginia. And so this became even more politicized, more polarized, and became an interesting platform for people to discuss company specific tax incentives offered by states to specific companies and whether or not this is a practice that should be going on in our country. So my paper first analyzes Amazon and New York and this story that unfolded and that specific deal, and then extrapolates that analysis to company specific tax incentives on a broader macro level and kind of pulls out the lessons we can learn there and applies them to company specific tax incentives in general.
Fantastic. And I'm sure many people remember that process. It was broadcast widely on the news. And in fact, here in Northern Virginia, we're probably even more familiar as being one of the sites selected for location. But not a lot of people are probably specific with the intricacies or the details of the tax incentives involved. So how did you select the topic for your paper?
Yeah, so I would say two main reasons. And the first reason I chose this topic is because I felt like it was a compelling topic with genuine and compelling arguments on both sides. So, when it became very polarized and mainstream media got a hold of this topic, there were a lot of articles written about it. And I'm accustomed to issues being polarizing across political lines. But what was interesting to me about this topic is I noticed that it was polarizing even within political parties and not just across political lines. For example, this deal between Amazon and New York was drafted by Governor Andrew Cuomo and Mayor Bill de Blasio, who are both Democrats. And the primary person pushing back against it was Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, who is also a Democrat. So it was members of the same party pushing against each other. And what this signified to me is that when you peel back the political rhetoric that surrounded this issue, the underlying policy arguments and policy concerns were genuine, and that there were actually people on both sides that felt strong convictions about their arguments. And that was a topic that was exciting for me to write about, something where there were people on both sides, strong arguments on both sides, and I looked forward to the opportunity to be able to analyze both sides of that argument. And then the second reason I would say I chose this topic is because I wanted to write about state and local taxes. I feel like state and local taxes are the unsung hero of tax policy argument. We spend a lot of time, maybe more time, talking about federal tax issues, but in reality, state and local tax issues play such a direct role in our day-to-day lives. They fund issues such as education and infrastructure and other issues that directly influence just the average person's day-to-day life and play such a big role on what our country is and the soul of our country. And so I knew I wanted to write about state and local taxes and give more attention to that topic.
Fantastic, Nick. Well, you've already won the competition. You don't have to rosy up to our state and local tax team here. No, I am sure that they would love to hear that, and probably many of them would agree with you. Also, it's interesting to hear, that you got involved in the topic because it was something that caught your attention just from the news, and that excitement about it. I think that passion about it definitely came through in your writing on the topic. So once you decided that that's what you were going to write on, tell us a little bit about how the drafting process worked for you.
Yeah, so my first step when I chose to write this topic was just to consume all the material I could on the topic. There had been a lot of opinions written and even some research that had been done on the topic. And so I wanted to consume it all to make sure I understood all the different perspectives that people had on the issue and the different arguments, both for and against New York coming into this deal with Amazon and for states entering into company specific tax incentives in general. So I spent a large amount of time just reading and just familiarizing myself and making sure. And you know what that process did for me is it not only helped me become more knowledgeable on it, but helped me become more, gain a stronger conviction in my own stance on the topic. Because, like I said, I felt like there were compelling arguments on both sides. So it helped me make a stand on where I stood and be able to and present my views on it. Then from that point, I actually made a chart where I laid out all the different arguments I found while I was researching, both for and against it, and organized the arguments like that. And once I felt like I had a robust and comprehensive list of arguments, I knew my stance. I responded to each of the arguments that were against it, and then presented the counter arguments to my own views and then the rebuttals to those counter arguments. And once I felt like I had all the arguments mapped out and outlined, both for and against, I then organized them into the topics you mentioned, kind of the body of my paper: equity, which is like the fairness of tax policy; efficiency, like the economic kind of effectiveness of the policy; and administrability, how simple it is for the government to administer this certain piece of tax policy. Once I had that outlined, I began writing. And I learned during this process that it's not a smart idea to write line by line and then go revise that line. I learned that, you just got to let the words flow and then come back maybe the next day and revise. So I learned that after spending too much time stopping and revising every little sentence. And then I had a professor who was able to review it for me and give some feedback, and then I implemented that feedback.
Fantastic. I mean, it sounded like a really organized and fastidious process, but it had good outcome. Now, let me ask, you did a lot of research and you said you already had a stance. Did you feel your stance waver at all during that research, or did it strengthen, or was there any change at all?
You know, I don't know if I had a super strong conviction one way or the other. I think if I had to answer that question though, I would say my view changed from where I initially stood versus where I ended up coming out on the issue. And then the more I researched the topic, I'd say the more firm I felt my conviction develop on that topic.
Well, that's really good. I think that speaks to going into this as, anyone can learn going into this with an open mind and then doing the research with that open mind and then letting the facts and the law guide you to your stance. So that's terrific to hear. You spoke a little bit about some assistance you got from a professor. Was there any other guidance that you got during the process?
Yeah, I would say both directly and indirectly, I received a tremendous amount of help and assistance from my professors that I've had. For example, my first year of law school, I had a professor, Professor Catherine Bramble. And just to tell you a quick story to kind of illustrate this professor, she has very high expectations for her students. And I say that in the most complimentary way possible. And in fact, at BYU, we have what's called a Scaristers Ball. There, at law school, there's a famous Barristers Ball that happens every year, but BYU also does one at Halloween, and they call it Scaristers Ball. So people dress up. And a student dressed up as a paper written by Catherine Bramble. So he wore all white and had red markings all over himself to symbolize the fact that when you submitted a paper to Catherine Bramble, she marked up almost every single word of that paper. And it took a little bit for me to get used to that, but once I embraced it, I learned that her high expectations for me elevated my vision for who I could be as a writer and the type of quality work product that I wanted to create. So I am very thankful for Catherine Bramble. She really helped me. And then also my tax law professor, Gladriel Shobe, she has done a lot of great work and research in her career, and she was instrumental in helping me understand different perspectives on my issue and making sure that the recommendations that I offered in my paper were reasonable and achievable. And so I am also very grateful for her.
Very nice. And it's good you were able to embrace that red ink during the editing process very early. That will be something that will continue, but as you said, it will ultimately improve that final product. So with that context, what advice would you have for any entrants that might be thinking about submitting papers in the future for this competition, maybe even next year?
Yeah, I think the first piece of advice I'd give to anyone that's listening to this is to make sure you actually do submit and enter the competition. It's easy to feel imposter syndrome and to feel like your paper is not good enough and no paper is ever perfect. And there's a lot of smart people that are going to enter this competition, but I did not expect my paper to win this competition, but I was passionate about it and I wanted to share it. So I entered it. So I invite everyone that's listening to this to enter the competition and to understand that you've worked hard on your paper and you deserve to be able to share it. The second piece of advice I'd give is something we kind of touched on already, and that's to not be paralyzed by a topic if you don't necessarily already know where you stand on the issue. I would say use that research process as an opportunity for you to become more knowledgeable on a certain topic, to evaluate and weigh out different perspectives or different vantage points on a certain issue. And I almost feel like if you're unsure, that you can be a more persuasive writer because you are able to examine more objectively the arguments for and against a certain piece of tax policy. So don't be paralyzed if you don't know where you stand. And that kind of leads into the third piece of advice I'd give, which is as you're writing your paper, once you have developed where you stand on it, make sure that you are giving credence to both sides and address both sides of the argument in your paper. I feel like it makes your paper more persuasive. It makes you more knowledgeable on the topic, and it makes you have a more sharp stance when you are able to understand and respond to people that view things differently than you do. And it makes your paper more objective and your analysis more pure, I would say.
Terrific. I think that's great advice, not just for doing a writing competition, but for anyone who is writing certainly a technical legal paper. So, and we see a lot of them, so we can echo those sentiments. And again, just wonderful advice. So I know you're in your final year of your program, but what are your future plans? What are your plans for your career? Maybe any other writing you're hoping to do?
Yeah. So I guess to start on a personal level, my wife and I are actually having a daughter in 2 weeks. So we're
Congratulations. Yeah.
thank you. We're really looking forward to that. But on an educational level, in the immediate future, have a lot of standardized tests. I'm in the middle of taking the 4 parts of the CPA exam right now. Then I have the standardized ethics exam for both accounting and law I have to take. And then upon graduating law school, I will take the bar exam next summer, which is, a lot of standardized tests, but I'm looking forward to that day when I've submitted the last one. And then on a professional level, after taking the bar, I'll join the legal team at Vincent and Elkins. And I'm really forward to being able to work with some of the people I met with their team last summer and to perform sophisticated work with the clients that they engage at Vincent and Elkins.
Yeah, that sounds great, Nick. And we really wish you the best. And from one girl dad to a very soon to be girl dad, again, congratulations. That feel free to give me a call anytime.
Oh,
So
I will, both about tax and parenting.
fantastic,
So
fantastic. So thanks again so much, Nick, for making the time to join us. And yeah, we appreciate this conversation and for all the advice you have. I'm sure that will be helpful.
thank you for having me on, Jasper. It was a pleasure talking to you. And I want to say thank you again to tax analysts and the tax notes team for reviewing my paper, for selecting my paper. I'm very grateful.
And for any of you who have not read Nick's paper, feel free to go take a look. We recommend it at taxnotes.com. And if you want to learn more about the Tax Notes Student Writing Competition, please visit taxnotes.com/student.
Want more like this? Subscribe for more tax videos. Special thanks to our executive producers, Jasper Smith and Paige Jones, showrunner and video editor, Jordan Parrish, and assistant video editor, Chris Trigo.